Hi, this is Stephen Beschloss with America, America,
And I'm Mark DeJacob with the Stop the Presses newsletter.
and this is On Target.
And today we want to talk about a good story in The Guardian that talks about J.D. Vance and his insulting comments toward our allies as they try to figure out what to do with Ukraine after the abandonment of Ukraine by the Trump administration. I mean, this is just terrible the way it's just these people who've been fighting a war against an aggressor for 3 years are being treated by the U.S. And they talk about a peacekeeping force, possibly by the Brits and the French, of about 20,000 troops. And J.D. Vance says 20,000 troops from some random country that has not fought a war in 30 or 40 years. And I mean, come on, Stephen. I mean, not only have France and Britain helped us in Afghanistan, the Brits also helped us in Iraq. It's like so he's like just mocking our allies and trying to just trying to make us as loathsome to the rest of the world as you possibly can. It's crazy, Stephen.
Yeah, as if there hasn't been enough hostility that they've generated to undermine our alliances with our democratic nations, our longstanding allies going back at least 80 years since the end of World War II. And look, it's not the first time with J.D. Vance. We saw that with him in Munich when he was attacking particularly the Germans, but Europeans more broadly for their failures of democracy and free speech. I mean, this guy, I mean, he's indifferent, he's arrogant, he's self-serving, and he's shown it, again, and to a point where, and this is what the Guardian did really well, and is really worth looking at, is that they shared a number of voices from the UK Parliament, people who are responding to this abuse from the United States, and that even included Nigel Farage, who's a friend of Trump and Vance, who said, specifically, and he's quoted in the piece that Vance is wrong, wrong, wrong. That the Brits in Afghanistan, sort of per capita, invested the same amount and suffered the same amount of losses. And so, this wrongheadedness, I think it's very important that we're not, relying strictly on the U.S. press and making a point of paying attention to what we can learn from our colleagues around the world.
Well, I mean, I've become very distressed with the Washington Post. I just canceled my subscription this week. I'm a media critic, so I like to read the Post. So, I'm sorry that I had to, but good gosh, I mean, their behavior is it won't allow it. I mean, their owner is supporting terrible people, and New York Times has got its problems, but we and AP tries, but they're being like harassed by the Trumpsters. The problem is that American mainstream media is just very rarely hits the nail on the head and very rarely is sharp enough and direct enough to really accurately depict the gigantic problem and peril we're in right now. And so I really appreciate the Guardian, which is doing those things. They've got, Guardian US has got
Yeah.
reporters based in the US. And, when people say to me, well, where are we gonna get our news from? I feel like the Guardian is one of the places we're going to get it from.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I think that's exactly right. I think there's other sort of international media, and look, the point is, pay attention to what international media is reporting. Pay attention to the questions of global impact. Uh, Focus on sort of these attacks on Ukraine and this kind of sidling up by Trump, this kind of further investment in the interests of Vladimir Putin at the disservice of the United States. I mean, we're in very clear traitorous circumstances right now, and it's very frustrating for so many of us, deeply worrying for so many of us that there doesn't seem to be the kind of pushback or the kind of voicing of opposition that we would and should be expecting from the Democrats and other people in positions of power. And so I think that's why it becomes particularly important to pay attention to what people around the world are saying, because we are, and I've said it of late. I mean, I think we have to think of ourselves in a global context right now, in a fight for the survival of democracy.
Well, that's exactly right. And I feel like, you know, what happened when Trump got elected last year wasn't just a disaster for the United States. I really feel like it was a disaster for the world. I
Yeah,
feel that that the people who voted for him were vandalizing our system and our peace and our and also any sense of justice. Because what we're seeing now in many ways is just this kleptocracy being set up to where rich oligarchs and Trump himself and his family can enrich themselves on the government. And you don't get that enough from domestic media, and people, while we have the internet and we can enjoy it, we need to be reading what people overseas are saying. I agree.
yeah, yeah. I mean, our future, our survival, our well-being, our ability to understand what's happening. I think we're all going to have to set our sights a little more widely.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Stephen, for the talk.
Thanks. We'll see you
Talk to you
next
next
time.
time.